Greetings. This week's project, a project my wife has been asking for a little while now. She got the idea at one of the cons and decided that since occasionally some of your clients get demanding,
no disintegration.
As you wish.
It would be a good idea to have a set of wrist binders. So I made her a set. All aluminum, nice thick, comfortable padded foam. Fits a variety of sizes of wrists. You can fit big wrists in there and little wrists in there. So anyways, got these done, and next week hopefully I'll get started on a holster for them. So have a great weekend, and I'll see you next time. Enjoy the video.
So I will occasionally let a vision that I have in my mind of what I want something to look like overwhelm my good judgment, and this was another one of those instances. Instead of using something light and easy to bend, I used 3/16" thick, 1.5" aluminum flat bar. It proved to be a little bit more difficult to work with than I was hoping. I don't have the proper tool to roll these things in circles, so I sort of did the best I could and clamped them into a piece of round drawn-over mantle tubing that I had and managed to eventually beat them into submission so that they somewhat resembled a circle. Cut that circle in half, measured out a set of hinges, and then welded the hinges onto each separate section. Once I had the pieces tack welded together, I ran a solid bead on both sides and then along the long edge and ground everything flat and smooth. People's wrists are going to be in there, so I tried to pay extra attention to making sure that everything was nice and safe. I had a basic idea of about what size I wanted the raised pieces to be, so I rolled another section of flat bar and measured out about 1.25 inches, and then cut a grand total of 10 pieces, 5 for each binder, one for the left and one for the right, and then laid them out roughly where I thought I wanted them to go. I used one to cover where the binders join, and that's where I put the magnets in, and then one on each end to kind of hide the hinges, and after that I just basically centered the last one. Once I was happy where they were laid out, I marked the edges of each piece where the other plates were going to go with an X so that I knew where to grind, and then beveled all of the edges on the sides on both the binders and the little tabs. That way I've got plenty of extra place I can put metal so that I can grind it all flat when I'm done. Of course, once I had everything all clamped up and ready to go, cleaned up, I welded them all together and then ground them all smooth, both on the top edges, on the inside edges, on the outside edges. Tried to round off all of the edges as best I could. Again, I don't want anybody getting nicked or cut or anything like that with these things. I picked up some rare earth magnets at one of the local stores, found a drill bit that corresponded to the size, drilled a couple of holes in the binders in both sides, and then filled the holes, well, didn't fill the holes, but put some super glue, a couple drops of super glue in each hole, stirred the super glue around so that it coated each edge, and then dropped the magnets inside the binders. I wasn't particularly careful about which polarity or anything like that. I basically just dumped them in there. Then when I went to do the corresponding side, I was a little more careful and made sure that they lined up appropriately. I was a little leery about using super glue at first, but I figured I'd give it a shot, and so far I haven't managed to pull the magnets out of the super glue after I gave it a little bit of time to set, so they seem to be holding. Cut a short section off of a piece of aluminum tubing using a tubing cutter, then filed the inside and outside edges nice and smooth and clean. I sanded the edges on some couplers that fit the stainless steel bolts that I picked out. I drilled a hole in the side of each binding, both the left and the right, then turned them to the inside and used a larger drill bit to effectively countersink the screw head. Filed everything out so that the screws dropped in there nice and neat. And then once I had everything set up, I used some Loctite to thread the screws into the couplers and Loctite them together so that the bindings swivel around that coupler. They fit loose enough that they'll pivot and they don't lack shit. And that way there's some wrist movement, but not a lot. And once I had everything together and was happy with the way they worked, I gave them a good sand, just for a couple of reasons. A, it helps remove any oils and stuff like that from the machining and all the different things that I've done with it. Wiped them off with some alcohol. Helps paint adhere a little bit better. Then gave them a good coat, or a couple of good coats, of an aluminum Rust-Oleum stuff that I had sitting on the shelf. Then after that, I gave them another couple of coats, a lot more sporadically and less thorough, with a much darker paint. Again, kind of going for a pseudo-worn look. Lined the inside of each binder with a double-sided duct tape. I didn't know such a thing existed, but it did. It does. Hopefully it'll hold up. Cut the pieces in half enough that I could lay a solid piece in one, left the hinges so that they wouldn't bind up, then got some insulation, air-conditioned insulation, or insulation foam from Lowe's, and stuck it to the inside. Now, it wasn't quite big enough. It's only 1.25 inches, so there's a little bit of gap on each side. Once I had the foam in place, I went through and cut out the extra tape so that you couldn't see it, or as best you could. It just cleaned it up a lot. I chose this kind of foam hoping that the nice thick but easily collapsible foam would make them more comfortable for a variety of wrists. And once I had the foam trimmed down to size, I went through and cut out the extra tape along the tops and bottoms, and then just gave them a quick dry brush, aluminum around the edges to try and make them look scuffed and worn, a little bit of black washed in the crevices and cracks to try and make them look like they had accumulated a little dirt and some use. And then to top them all off, we got our quality assurance inspector, Bellatrix, to look at them and make sure they were all good, and she signed off. So good to go. Thanks for watching, and hope you enjoyed the video.